Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be doing my part 4 of my current bookshelf tour, and I'm going to do the topmost shelf. I moved around some of the art supplies that had been hanging out in it so I could put like mostly all books in it again. So I'll just show you. Hopefully that angle isn't too bad. I realize there's really poor lighting, but I guess it's the dark covers of most of the books on that shelf coupled with just the general lighting in my room at this time of day. But obviously I'm going to be taking all the books down off of the shelf to show you guys, and so you can see them soon. Now, first on this pile right here, this is another book by Walter Dean Myers. I discovered him in 2011 when I was taking a course in young adult literature. I absolutely fell in love with his writing. It's just so real and honest and so good. Like unlike a lot of other like YA and middle grade contemporary writers within the last like 20 years or so, the 21st century, it just like feels like relatable and realistic because it's like gritty urban settings instead of these like sheltered bourgeois suburban high school, like, oh, and then Johnny looks at me, and like just boring like just shallow stuff. He's concerned with basically real stuff with like kids who actually have to struggle. They don't have all this like class privilege. But I'm sorry if I'm getting too political and off topic. And this is called The Young Landlords. I found it in the children's section at Mr. K's, a local used bookstore. I'm sorry if the angle is all over the place, but I don't have much space or choice in when I film. And so this is a synopsis. If you were looking for a real ghetto dump, you couldn't beat the Stratford Arms. There was Oxia Ben Kenobi throwing karate chops upstairs, Petey Darden making booze downstairs, and Mrs. Brown grieving for Jack Johnson, who had died for the third time in a month, and not a rent payer in the bunch. Still, when Paul Williams and the Action Group got the arms for $1, they thought they had it made. But when their friend Chris was arrested for stealing stereos, and Dean's dog started fighting fire hydrants, and Gloria started kissing, being a landlord turned out to be a lot more work than being a kid. And it also won some awards, the ALA YA Best Book of the Year and an ALA Notable Book. And the next one is Ruth's Journey. This is, I guess, like a spin-off, sort of a companion volume authorized for the Gone with the Wind franchise universe of characters by Donald McCaig. He also wrote Rhett's People, which I started reading a while ago, but I had to return it to the library before I was able to finish it. But I would like to, like get back to it someday. And this is a book about Mammy, and it's so much better than that garbage. I'm sorry, like unauthorized, just like pile of hot steaming mess. The Wind Done Gone. I should do a whole video on that. I did a long review about that on my blog some time ago. It was just like so awful. Like obviously this is a really interesting topic, kind of like the slave, like African American like characters in Gone with the Wind getting their own story. But this is like, well, I haven't read the book yet, but I'm told this one does it a lot better than that crappy like The Wind Done Gone. Can you tell I absolutely hated that book? It was just so awful. And here's the synopsis. Before Tara, before Scarlet and Red, before the war that would divide a nation, there was Mammy, acclaimed author Donald McCaig's national bestseller, authorized by the Margaret Mitchell estate, brings magnificently to life one of the most beloved characters in literature. On Saint-Domingue, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, a French colony consumed by the flames of revolution, a senseless attack leaves only one survivor, a beautiful little black girl named Ruth. Captain Augustin Fournier brings the child home and is pleased to see that his wife, Solange, is instantly enchanted. Ruth becomes Solange's companion, comforter, and slave, fleeing with the family to the bustling city of Savannah. There she serves as Mammy to Solange's daughter Ellen, and after Ellen marries a rough Irishman and moves to the cotton plantation called Tara, Ruth becomes Mammy to a new generation of girls, the O'Haras. In the hands of award-winning author Donald McCaig, Ruth's powerful story takes on an unforgettable voice all its own. Her experiences of love, marriage, childbirth, and unspeakable loss and trauma parallel America's transformation as the young nation grapples with a divided soul and a bloody destiny. This spellbinding novel of fortitude, heartbreak, and indomitable will is a tale that stands on its own, even as it sheds new light on Margaret Mitchell's enduring classic. Oh, and here's another one from Walter Dean Myers. Can you tell I really like him? This also came from the used bookstore, Mr. K's, in the children's section. If I don't specify otherwise, like pretty much all these books did come from Mr. K's, and this just looks really cool. Let me see if there is a synopsis or anything. I know it doesn't look like there's much of a synopsis on the back, but it starts a registered letter brings bad news from the South, and I start looking for a summer job. Hopefully, not in a funeral parlor. I like Harlem in the summer, except when it gets too hot, which it had been for the last week, and we hadn't even reached July yet. On my block, women sat in their windows, and kids hung out on the fire escapes, trying to catch whatever breeze got lost and wandered up to Harlem. Old Man Mills and Jimmy Key were sitting on the stoop playing checkers. Jimmy had been wounded in the war and walked with a cane that he held across his lap as he studied the board. Everybody, except maybe Jimmy, knew that Mr. Mills was going to win. I really, really love Walter D. Myers, and this is also for Mr. K's, as I mentioned, 1,000 White Women by Jim Fergus, The Journals of May Dodd. It's historical fiction. They have a card outside. I've gotten a number of books for, like the $3. They do it by different genres and the different carts. And obviously, I go to the historical fiction cart most of all because that's the genre I love reading and writing. This is based on an actual historical event, but told through fictional diaries. And the story of a remarkable woman who travels west in 1875 and marries the chief of the Cheyenne Nation. 1,000 White Women begins with May Dodd's journey west into the unknown. Yet the unknown is a far better fate than the life she left behind. Committed to an insane asylum by her blue blood family for the crime of loving a man beneath her station, May finds that her only hope of freedom is to participate in a secret government program whereby women from the quote-unquote civilized world become the brides of Cheyenne warriors. What follows is the story of May's breathtaking adventures, her brief, passionate romance with the gallant young Army Captain John Bork, her marriage to the great chief Little Wolf, and her conflict of being caught between two worlds, loving two men, living two lives. So vividly has Jim Fergus depicted the American West that May Dodd's journals are like a capsule in time. And I'll have to just start stacking them up in a better way so they don't all come crashing down during the video. Here's the next one. Obviously, I cannot resist, Russian historical fiction or Russian anything. I've been a passionate Russophile since December of 1992, around the time I turned 13 years old. So, over 30 years now, and it is like a bit of a doorstopper. I love books you can just, climb into and live in for a couple of weeks. Give me a deliberately saga-length book over one that's all of 250 pages you can breeze through in a couple of hours. And here's the synopsis. St. Petersburg, New Year's Eve, 1916. Marina Makarova is a young woman of privilege, aching to break free of the constraints of her genteel life, a life about to be upended. Swept up on the tides of the Russian Revolution, Marina will join the marches for workers' rights, fall in love with the radical young poet, and betray all she holds dear before being betrayed in turn. As her country experiences unimaginable upheaval, Marina's own coming of age unfolds, marked by deep passion and devastating loss. Written in lush, powerful prose, The Revolution of Marina M. is the epic story of one ordinary, indomitable woman's journey through some of the most dramatic events of our era. And this is a book which I, can't believe I haven't read yet, although to be fair, I have listened to part of it on audiobooks over the years because when we took the long car drives to see my grandparents in Pennsylvania and go to Boston and other stuff like that, my father would frequently play audiobooks of classic literature, and Middlemarch was one of them. He also has played a lot of Anthony Trollope books on the car, so I guess I'm kind of familiar with parts of the story, but I don't believe I ever listened to the full-length audiobook, and so I'll definitely I will be reading this someday, particularly because I love long books and women's fiction, and I know it's kind of embarrassing to admit, particularly because I'm such a proud second wave radical feminist, but I just haven't read nearly as much classic literature written by women as I have by men, so that's definitely a gap which I need to fill. And these are some books which I also I did mention they came from Mr. K's. If I ever have enough clout on booktube to hold a readathon, I will definitely be doing one in May for Jewish American Heritage Month, and these are obviously novels which were translated from the Yiddish. Sholem Aleichem is one of my top 10 favorite writers. I started reading him when I was 18 years old back in the autumn of 1998, and I was just absolutely hooked. He just has so many cute, funny stories, and I would obviously highly recommend his, probably the most famous, if you're not already into Yiddish literature, the story collection, Tevye the Dairyman. Sometimes it's called Tevye's Daughters, or Tevye and His Daughters. Obviously, that was in turn became the famous musical and movie Fiddler on the Roof, and it does a really, really good job of like bringing the stories to life. Obviously, that's not in the pile itself, but I would highly recommend it to you guys. Although I should mention in the story collection, Tevye has 7 daughters, and 5 of them get love stories, and there's like much different endings for certain of the characters and storylines that there are in the movie. And so anyway, this is The Manor by Isaac Bashevis Singer, who was like won the Nobel Prize. He's considered like one of the 3 great Yiddish writers, and this is obviously Sholem Aleichem is also one of the 3 greatest Yiddish writers. I really do need to get more familiar with Yiddish literature, as you might have heard if you have saw my video about Dara Horn's excellent and deliberately provocatively titled essay collection, People Love Dead Jews. Like, more people can name 3 death camps than they can name 3 Yiddish writers, or like even forget about like writers in any other Jewish languages, like Hebrew, Ladino, or Judeo-Arabic, or Judeo-French, or whatever. So that's definitely a gap I do need to fill at some point. And if I ever do have enough like active subscribers and friends on BookTube, I would really like to be hosting a readathon for Jewish American Heritage Month, which is in May. And I mentioned this book on a previous bookshelf tour thing. It came out of a crate that unfortunately never went into storage. And this came from, it was a book sale at the Synagogue Agudat Achim in Schenectady, New York. I forget if it was, I got it there during the Carrot Festival, which is a yearly like just like big community-wide like celebration with like lots of like vendors and food and like entertainment and just all sorts of cool fun stuff, or if I just got it from a regular book sale there. And like, who doesn't know the Little House series by Laura Ingalls Wilder? But this isn't the entire series, it's just the first 3 books: Little House in the Big Woods, Little House on the Prairie, and On the Banks of Plum Creek. And I also did mention this in the previous video about the crate books, and I've mentioned it in like many other previous videos, so I'm obviously not really going to go into any detail about it here. Dr. Zhivago by Boris Leonidovich Pasternak, except to say, I was really disappointed with this book. It wasn't, I would never consider it like, horrible or terrible, or say you shouldn't read it at all, but it just like, it reads like someone, it was written by someone who was like first and foremost a poet, and he just had no real familiarity with like writing actual prose in a novel, because there's just so many things that just seem like, like amateurish. So, check this out if you're interested in Russian literature, but just like don't make it one of the, first 10 or 20 books you're going to read. And like, I definitely recommend his poetry far more than I would his one and only novel. And the last one in this little pile is another by Isaac Bashevis Singer, Enemies, a Love Story. And I believe this was later made into a movie, and it just sounds like a really interesting like story. Like, how is this poor guy going to get out of this dilemma? Almost before he knows it, Herman Broder, refugee and survivor of World War II, has 3 wives: Jadwiga, the Polish peasant who hid him from the Nazis; Masha, his beautiful and neurotic true love; and Tamara, his first wife, miraculously returned from the dead. Astonished by each new complication, and yet resigned to a life of evasion, Herman navigates a crowded Yiddish New York with the sense of perpetually impending doom. The first of Singer's novels to be set in America, Enemies, a Love Story, tells an unexpected and moving tale. And surprise, surprise, this is also from Mr. K's Anne of Green Gables. I read the mass market on paperback like years and years ago. I was probably like 10 or 11 years old. I remember reading all of it, or maybe most of it, at my paternal grandparents' house. And I've obviously seen the like TV movie from the 1980s. I think it was from Canada, but obviously I don't know the specifics off the top of my head. And I've seen like other films. I don't think I've seen any of the silent versions of it, but I did see this like really terrible like version of it from sometime in the 30s, early 40s, by a young child actress. She liked the role, I guess, so much, it was so popular, she changed her real life name to Anne Shirley, but it just like, it effed up so much stuff, but not nearly as much as that garbage Anne with an E, Sorry Not Sorry. I have a whole rant on that I did on my blog. I would love to turn that into a video, and I'm talking about how like classic books do not need like modern reboots or remakes, but at least that like version from the late 30s, early 40s doesn't like radically change nearly as much or invent like lots of like stupid new garbage as Anne with an E. But obviously that's a rant for a whole other topic. Like, who hasn't read Anne of Green Gables? Like, if they haven't read the entire series, at least they've read the classic first book. And obviously I had to get this one when I saw it was like a hardcover, and that's like really cool, and it has like illustrations too. That's always like a plus when you're getting a classic book. And I also saw I believe this is the second book, Anne of Avonlea, also in a hardcover, kind of like a library book thing with the plastic like laminated cover on that. I started reading the sequel like probably soon after I finished the first book, but I was only like 12 years old or whatever then, so I just felt like it wasn't an interesting story for me. I couldn't really relate to Anne because she was already like, like 16, 17 years old. And when you're like a preteen, that's like, a giant age gap. She was basically like doing things I had absolutely no interest in and found kind of boring. But obviously now that I'm a grown adult, I'm definitely looking forward to reading this one all the way through. I read A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. I'm back in, I believe it was 2011. It was so good. Definitely one of the like best, like I would even say like in the top 20s of books I've ever read. It was absolutely so memorable. So many like wonderful details, just like bringing the story like wonderfully to life. Although I would not recommend the sequel in all but name, Joy in the Morning, and the movie based on it. It was like terrible. It was somehow even worse than the book, if that's at all possible. I have a whole rant about both that book on my blog and about the like creepy Dr. Mason in that book. I hated that dude so much. Ew, but this book is absolutely, classic, and I would, like totally recommend it. And I thought this was also really cool because on the back it has, the Buy War Bond sticker. So that's, like a really interesting thing, like just a mark of when it was originally published. I'm trying not to make this video too long. This is the Illuminator from the historical fiction crate at Mr. K's. I love, like medieval and Renaissance like historicals, and I'm hoping to read a lot more of them. It is England in the late 14th century, a time when the old feudal order is starting to crack, but the whim of a lord or the pleasure of a bishop still has the power to seal nearly anyone's fate. Books are rare and costly, painstakingly lettered by hand, and illuminated with exquisite paintings. For Lady Catherine of Blackingham Manor, a widow and mother trying to safeguard her holdings without the dubious protection of her late husband, it is a time made both sweeter and more perilous by the arrival of a master illuminator called Finn. Caught between the king's taxes and the church's tithes, Catherine strikes a bargain with the local abbot. She will take Finn and his pretty young daughter into her household in exchange for the monastery's protection. Finn is working not only on approved church texts, but secretly and dangerously on a forbidden English translation of the Bible. As the hesitant friendship between Catherine and Finn grows into a passionate alliance, wonderful new storyteller Brenda Rickman Van Trees brings us a glorious novel of love, treachery, faith, and redemption on the eve of the Renaissance. And the final few books on the shelf, this is another medieval book. I found out this author has done quite a bit of like medieval historical fiction, including a number of different series with real life historical figures from England. And this starts in the year 1135. As church bells toll for the death of England's King Henry I, his barons face the unwelcome prospect of being ruled by a woman, Henry's beautiful daughter, Maud, Countess of Anjou. But before Maud can claim her throne, her cousin Stephen seizes it. In their long and bitter struggle, all of England will bleed and burn. Sharon K. Penman's splendid novel summons to life a spectacular medieval tragedy whose unfolding breaks the heart, even as it prepares the way for splendors to come, the glorious age of Eleanor of Aquitaine and the Plantagenets that would soon illumine the world. I love Eleanor of Aquitaine. She's one of my like feminist sheroes, like proto-feminist throughout history, both like history in general and women's history in particular. And this is another book by Donald McCaig. I love the U.S. Civil War. Someday I'm still like hoping to write some historical fiction about it myself. I like started like many years ago, but like never finished that particular story. But it's definitely been like a special interest of mine since I was about 8 years old. I should do a whole other video about like Civil War literature and maybe like documentaries and like nonfiction about it and all sorts of stuff like that. And here's the synopsis. Jacob's Ladder is a Civil War epic, a love story that pits the indomitable longing of the human heart against circumstances of racism, slavery, and war. Duncan Gatewood, 17, and heir to the Gatewood plantation, falls in love with Maggie, a mulatto slave who conceives a son, Jacob. Maggie and Jacob are sold south, and Duncan is packed off to the Virginia Military Institute. As Duncan fights for Robert E. Lee, Jesse, a Gatewood slave whose love for Maggie is unrequited, escapes north and enlists in Lincoln's army, determined to confront his former masters, while Maggie finds herself living a life she could never have imagined as the wife of a blockade runner. From the interlocked lives of masters and slaves, Donald McCaig conjures a passionate and richly textured story in the heart of America's greatest war. The destiny of these three compelling characters connect a Vicksburg brothel to to a Richmond salon, the nightmare of a Confederate hospital, to the lurid belle of battlefields at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. And I didn't mention Mr. McKeag, I believe he has passed away fairly recently, but his like oeuvre seemed to be like a Southern historical fiction, and that's also something maybe I could do a video about at some point in future when I'm more familiar with it. You know, like classics of like the U.S. Southern like experience in history, particularly because I currently live in the South. Hopefully not for much longer. I'm hoping to like make Aliyah move to Israel, but it's just like a lot of people just they don't know a lot about U.S. Southern history. They just dismiss like, oh, all Southerners were like Hicks and hayseeds and clay eaters, and they were all in the Klan, and they were like irredeemable racist bigots. But like it's a lot more complex than that. Like you're like kind of like ignorant, and like you can't think in like nuances if you think like every single person who has like ever lived in the South was like an irredeemably like racist bigot, or like even harbored any kinds of feelings like that at all. It's just like seriously, so many people these days, I mean, I'm sorry for the expression, I know it's kind of like inopportune given the subject, but they just can't think outside of these like very like black and white ways of thinking. And also on this shelf, this is my cute little colored pencil holder. I got this for when I make Aliyah. It can hold all of my colored pencils I got from OpenStock instead of like sets that have their own little like carrying tins already. And these are just a few like adult coloring books which were also on the shelf. I am still planning to do some like ArtTube videos at some point in the future. Thank you very much for watching. If you've read any of these books, or if you have them on your TBR list, or if you just like thought about them or like heard about them at some point in the past, or maybe like interested in reading them at some point in future, just let me know down in the comments. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. And I really do love seeing comments from you guys, even if you just say like great video or leave an emoji or something like that. It lets me know, people are actually watching all the way through to the end, and I'm not wasting my time making videos. So see you guys again very soon. Thanks again for watching. Bye.